Welcome everybody for coming tonight to Westside Institutional Synagogue for the great debate that we have tonight on the Middle East. We welcome all those who have come tonight, you our guests, and also our guests as well, our panelists. And thank those who are involved in making this happen tonight. Thank you to Alyssa Nightingale. We know worked hard many hours on this event, along with then as well to our president, Shalom Maya. So, a woman is rubbing a bottle, and out comes a genie. And she's amazed. She's never had this opportunity come up before, and she turns to the genie and she said, "So I get my 3 wishes, right?" So the genie says, "No, that's folklore, not true, that's too much. You get 1 wish. You get 1 wish over here." Okay. So she turns and she says, "Okay, please, genie, why don't you bring, she takes out maps and she takes out pictures. She goes, here is the Middle East. Okay, here's the Middle East. I want you to bring peace to this area. They've been fighting and there's conflict. Figure out a way to solve everything that's going on here." And the genie says, "I'm an old genie. What do you expect from me? That's a big wish. I can't do it. I can't do it." So she turns to the genie and says, "Okay, I have another wish then. I'm single. I just passed 50. I'm looking for a guy who is religious, who's modern, who's knowledgeable, who's handsome, who's kind, who's sweet, who's caring, who's loving." And he goes, "Well, just pass me those darn maps, please." So we start off the evening light, but this was not one of our comedy evenings. Our comedy Shabbatones, as we have here once in a while, our weekends. But on the contrary, just today began what is known as the 9 days, the days which lead up to when we mourn the destruction of the temple. And today, according to the Bible, explicitly in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it says that today is the death of Aaron, the brother of Moses. Aaron was known for being a lover of peace and pursuer of peace. Ohev shalom verodev shalom. And that is certainly one of the central topics tonight, and one of the issues that we stand here to discuss. Is peace being promoted? How do we search for peace? When is peace appropriate? What is peace? These are all part of the greater issues that are going to be discussed, and we are not going to avoid things tonight. We're going to face things head on. There is honesty on all sides that we're going to be exploring. Before introducing our amazing panel, I want to just set some ground rules. For a debate like this, you need ground rules. And for a moment, I put down my rabbi hat and I serve as moderator. And as moderator, I'm getting very serious now, here are the rules. Tonight's debate will begin with opening comments from our introductory speaker. After our introductory speaker, we begin our official debate. Our debate begins with opening comments from each of our 4 main panelists, who I will introduce in a moment. Each of those panelists have 2 to 4 minutes to make their opening statements. After their opening statements, I'll begin raising the questions or the issues. We'll go 4, one of them, each one after the other. The way it works, the style of the debate is we will pick a different individual to open up answering that question. The other side, so to speak, gets to then respond to that, and that is it for each question. Speaker, response, speaker, response, speaker, response, speaker, response. I know that will leave people wanting for a greater discussion, for a response, a rebuttal. Many of the panelists will feel like, wait a second, there was something off there, I need to respond. The way we're going to respond to that, if you think anything is off, if you think something was missing, or you needed to say something, we'll capture it in the Q&A session or in your concluding statements. So make a mark if there's any extra comment you feel you did not get to, and we'll put those in the concluding statements at the end. And also you could throw them in as we're taking questions from the audience, and some questions were emailed beforehand, as we take some of those questions near the end before the summations and conclusions of the evening. There is no talking over anybody. If someone feels that something is said that's way off base, incorrect, a travesty, we are not allowed to say anything to interject in the middle. There will be a question and answer session, And if you really have a problem and are not called on, I'll give away everybody's email address afterwards and you could harass them later on. But besides that, we ask that you not interrupt in the middle. Let everybody get their points across. If you have a problem with it, you can raise your hand for question and answer at the end. If we don't get to you, good point. Shut off the cell phones. Please shut off the cell phones. That's excellent. And if there's something you don't get to, you're going to have to hold it in. We happen to have a lot of security here tonight. We hope none of that's really necessary. And we don't have to ask anybody to calm down and anybody to please step out and ask anybody to leave. We want to avoid all that stuff and just have an enjoyable intellectual evening of knowledge and information and debate and pushback and discussion. And that's what tonight is primarily about. Not more. Let's keep it to that. Okay, to really kick off the evening, before I introduce our first speaker, who is Joey Reynolds. Joey is, not too many people know this who do know him, don't realize that he was recently inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is a big deal, not a small deal. Joey is, of course, the great, the legendary talk show host, known as one of the most creative people in entertainment. He has his own recipes, he has his own ideas, his own music, he has his own shows, his own creation, his own radio show. In every area, Joey has excelled. His humor, people will listen at 4:30 in the morning and be laughing, just laughing. I've listened to his show on occasion, and it's a wonderful show. I know many of the people who have gone on, many people swear by Joey Reynolds, and he's also considered really the father of his genre of talk radio. He is worshipped by many of the leaders in talk radio today. And before I introduce the other four panelists, I asked Joey to come up for a moment. Joey Reynolds. Thank you.
I want to work without a mic. I'm so unused to it. I don't want to use a mic. I don't want to use a mic. Maybe I need one. Bullhorn. It's a privilege to be here always for the great freedom we have in our country, of course, that we can talk to each other. And if I could ever get along with my kids, then we would have no debates. My daughter's pregnant, and so I'm going to be a grandfather for the first time. I have one of my two daughters. And I told the kids, I got them both on the phone, and I told them that I was Michael Jackson when he left his kids because he thought his mother would want them. If she didn't want them, they were going to go to Diana Ross. So I told my children that if their mother did not want them, if I should die, that they're going to go to Brad Pitt. And my daughter wanted to know when I was leaving. So that's the kind of family I have. But I wanted to mention that I've been to Israel. We did the show from Jerusalem. And I, of course, have gone to Masada and taken the mud bath and gone to Tel Aviv. And I love Israel. And there's no denying that when you're there, you feel shalom, you feel peace. And it just overcomes anybody who is Judeo-Christian Muslim. It's our religion. And each of us, we all share that same God. So as you go into the old city, there's a working order where everybody gets along. You could have tea, you could have, whether you're buying challah, whatever you are doing in the old city, it hums. And that kind of a peace I would like to see all over the world. That's the kind of peace that I enjoy, where you feel like you belong. And everybody is doing what they have to do, and they're not bothering each other with politics and military. I kind of like that, but that's not reality. We have so many issues. So what I wanted to say about that is I think in this present day, we have a couple of good role models in the world. One of them is Turkey, because Turkey has a moderate Muslim nation. It's a republic, and they don't mix religion as a government with their politics. Their religion is practiced separately, and they are a Muslim nation, and they do worship 5 times a day, as you know, with the towel, and it's very lovely. It's very lovely. And of course, Istanbul is on 2 continents. It's Asia and Europe, and I did the show from there as well. Now, in Turkey, because of the great dynamic, there also is that peaceful feeling, and it's not the Holy Land. It's not. It was Constantinople, So it did have Christianity. I have a question I want to ask these guys. And I want to ask just one question to each of the people, and then I'm going to sit down. I want to know if we all have the same God. Because I can't understand how if we have the one God, Allah, Jehovah, God of our father, God of Moses, and Abraham, and Jesus, if you want to throw Jesus as the God, as the Son God in the equation. How do we have all of these things that we do to each other, which are horrible, under the name of this one God who teaches us to love? That's what I can't figure out. I will never be able to figure that out, and I would like to ask that question for these guys tonight. And that's what I really would like to know. I mean, fighting over the land and the traditions and all that is getting this here to debate. But are we worshiping the same God?
Yes.
Let me hear it. Is Allah the same God? Is Allah the God of Abraham?
Yes, of course.
Joey, if you don't mind, I want that question to be the first question, but I haven't introduced who they are, so people know who's responding to the question. Let me just say who our panelists are tonight, and we'll start with that amazing question. Just on the panel, we'll go in order from sitting on this side. We have Brother Ghazi Khankan. I start by what I did was, I was curious to see if you put in their name in Google and you put quote next to their name, what quote is generated? And I've done that for each of the four of you. Now here is the quote that came up when I put that next to your name. Here we go. No one should be nervous. Nothing too crazy came up. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. Brother Ghazi. Jihad means to struggle and survive. The most difficult jihad, in my opinion, is to raise good children in New York. That's what Brother Ghazi had written and said. He has been the voice of Islam in America since 1967, lectured across the United States, produced radio and television programs on religion, civilization, and way of life. He works on the media and the image of Islam to the West. That has been one of his major raison d'etre here in this world in working on the proper image of how we perceive Islam, among his many other credits. Sitting next to him is Professor Hani Awadallah of Clifton, New Jersey. When I put in the same line, this is what came up on the internet.
I'm scared.
Okay, here we go. We don't mind your support for Israel. Support Israel, but at the same time, understand the suffering and tragedy of the Palestinian people. That's what came up when I did the search. He's a chemistry professor at Montclair State University and president of the Arab American Civic Organization, frequently quoted in many of the major media outlets. Sitting next to him is Alan Katz. Alan is the author of the new book, For the Record, which, as I had told Alan at the beginning, it is now being considered in 2 of the schools that I know. I teach in Jewish high schools. It's being considered as a supplementary text to courses teaching the state of Israel. Alan is, besides being the author of this great new book, which is a book that deals with one man's passion for defending Israel and its people in the face of adversity. He's a graduate of Syracuse University, a lawyer, a thinker, a writer, and also a graduate of political science from the Maxwell School. Alan Katz's quote, when I put it in Google and wrote quote next to it, here we go.
Nothing.
We had a bunch, that's fine. A list of 40. Here we go, no. Okay. The problem is when we hold Israel to a different standard of morality. People who stand mute when Palestinian terrorists murder Israeli children and then object when Israelis destroy the house of a suicide bomber. That is the quote that came up at the time. Shannon Taylor is also on our panel. Shannon is a dear friend and a congregant of ours, but also a great leader. Shannon's organization, Jews and Blacks in Conversation, which has brought many programs to our synagogue, many amazing programs, a Martin Luther King Day program, among others. Shannon is beloved, but beyond that, he is a great thinker. He is a great ideologue. Shannon is someone who has led many a debate here in our synagogue and has even been influential in pushing me to be more active in these areas and to be inspirational in leading debates such as this within our synagogue, and I thank Shannon for that. When I looked up Shannon and the internet, the quote I got as follows. The first one was an expletive. No, I'm just kidding. The quote that came from Shannon. Here we go. The world needs to understand that the Jewish people, Israel, Jerusalem are all one. And they are all together in America's best interests. That's what Shannon said, and that is on the internet. These are just quotes that you could find, public domain, if you search them. Let's begin. We start tonight with Joey's question, an excellent question. We all claim to have a religion that believes in peace and love, and we all claim to have a religion where we use a different name, God, Allah, which basically our religions understand that they're variations of the same deity. Do we actually have the same God? Brother Ghazi.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. See, as Muslims, we bear witness that there is only one God, that Prophet Muhammad is the last messenger of God, that Abraham was Khalilullah, the friend of God, that Moses was Kalimullah, with whom God spoke directly, and we bear witness that Jesus, son of the Virgin Mary, by the will of God, is min ruhillah, that is from the Spirit of God. For this is part and parcel of the Islamic belief system. For Islam simply means submission and peace. Hence, we submit peacefully to the will of our Creator, God Almighty, whose Arabic name is Allah, and it is the same God that created all of us. We probably came on different ships, but now we are all in the same boat, believe it or not. Allah is the Arabic name, Elohim in Hebrew, French Dieu, Spanish Dios, Italiano Dio, and in German God, English God, but the name is Arabic is Allah. So Allah is the one and only God that created all of us in the whole universe. And I don't think the Palestine-Israel conflict is simply a religious conflict. It's also a humanitarian issue that needs to be addressed peacefully, inshallah, God willing.
We have a response from the other side to this question.
I thought we were going to go...
We go 1-1.
Joey asked everybody.
Okay,
Yes?
fair enough. Hani?
Sure. I don't think I can add too much to what my brother Ghazi had mentioned. I think he is also deeper in his religious beliefs than me. I am a Muslim. I do believe that all of us are God's children. I believe that Moses is a prophet, as the Quran tells us, and Jesus is a prophet as well, and that Muhammad came to be the last of all prophets. As a matter of fact, the name of Moses is repeated many times than Muhammad is mentioned in the Quran. And the Israelites also are mentioned much more than any other nation in the Quran. We consider, I think we have ranking for prophets, and I think Moses comes right on top along with Muhammad and Jesus. We do believe in brotherhood and sisterhood, and I really wholeheartedly believe that all of us are brothers and sisters if we really care to understand each one of us to be treated as he wished to be treated by other people, to treat people as he wished to be treated by them. I really think if everybody were to
stick to that rule, peace and brotherhood would prevail in this world.
Thank you. Alan.
Obviously, we would find it very difficult to disagree with what just has been said. Hani and Ghazi reiterate the bedrock of freedom and brotherhood. The problem is when one particular group tries to co-opt God, or their version of God, for their own personal agenda. That's where differences start, and that's where intolerance is built. And those are the matters that we have to address.
Shannon.
I always prefer a discussion that deals with flat-out religion, because I believe the entire premise of the Middle East must be based on religion. And people who deal with the subject without addressing religion will never understand it or do any justice to it. Do we believe in the same God? Of course. I don't know of any pagans in any Muslim country or Christian country or Israel. I don't know of any Baal worship or any Moloch worship or any child sacrifice. However, many diatribes are hurled against the Jews because you think that's what they think we're doing, the way all our enemies are slandering us from one end of the world to the other. Don't think it's limited to present conflicts. It has gone throughout history. But it is our God. It is Judaism that came first. And no one has ever said that this is not true. It is ironic, I would think, it is ironic that if it is the same God, that it is not honored as to God's wishes, because it is recognized that God owns the land, God apportions the land, and God defines the boundaries of the land. And God says in our Bible, I apportion these lands for the Jews. He certainly was very generous to the descendants of Ishmael. Very, very generous, much more so than to the Jews. But to the Jews, we have a tiny little nation, barely the size of New Jersey, and we are entitled to Judea and Shomron as well. That was our biblical heartland. That's our God. That's the same God. And I don't say this as a matter of nationalism even. I say it as a matter of firm belief. Now, if you do not believe in our God, if you don't believe in the God of destiny, the God of the world, then you make claims that it doesn't matter. You take people's homes away. And that's where the crux of a problem comes. I have no doubt that everybody all over believes that they are entitled to this land under God. I have no doubt that that's the crux of the argument. Joey, by the way, is a religious man. And I found him always to be extremely respectful of religion in every show I ever did.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. I promised everyone to get opening comments, and I don't want to skip over that. I would allow that. Just to close out this issue, it's an amazing first question, and already we're getting started. Just to weigh in on this one question, and the rest are my questions that I'm posing, so I will step out of the other questions. This one wasn't. From the Jewish point of view, it seems that the criteria and component of what makes a religion a good religion, this could be true for any other, each religion has to do its own searching, is whether it promotes ethical monotheism. Both those together, one without the other, we believe is not healthy. If you have the ethics without the monotheism, we believe the notion that one sociologist, a secular sociologist, deemed as the theory of the severed flower. The first generation may be fine, the next generation of a secular society is doomed to conflict. On the other hand, monotheism without an adherence to ethics and an understanding of what ethics means and being good to other people is disastrous, it's harmful, it's destructive. You need ethical monotheism. And whether that's part of our religion, this religion, that religion, it's for all of us to explore on our own and figure out. But that is one take of the view. Let us begin. We begin now opening comments. Let's begin, Shannon. Opening comments, we'll come back this way. Let's keep the comments to 2 to 4 minutes maximum, closer to 2 if you can.
I want to welcome everybody. Many of you are dear friends. I thank you so much. In July, people of all backgrounds and ages for coming here on a warm July night to this very sanctified ground, and I especially want to thank the members of the Muslim community for coming to join us in this discussion. This is a most appreciated effort, and I hope that it will continue to be a friendly discussion. I thank also Mr. Reynolds, who has a nightly program of I don't know how many hours, and his producer, Myra Channon, and they have a full evening of work ahead of them, and they have hosted many such discussions and given birth to such discussions, and they do, I would say they do God's work and their endeavors. And when they came back from Israel, they did work every night, airing live, 5 hours from Israel, and then traveling throughout the country, finding out for themselves how wonderful Israel is. And I think that one must know the history of this country to be able to appreciate the discussion we have. And I would only quote from Zev Jabotinsky, thanks to a friend, Helen Friedman, of Americans for a Safe Israel, when he wrote as to the 1900s, that not in Russia nor in Poland had there been such an intense and widespread atmosphere of hatred as prevailed in the British Army in Palestine in 1919 to 1920. The British encouraged anti-Jewish riots, with Arabs being paid by the British to have mob attacks against the Jews. 1920, 21, 29 were years that saw organized Arab pogroms. From 1936 to 39, 500 Jews were killed by Arabs. These organized riots paved the way for the British White Paper of 1939, which abandoned the Zionist policy of Britain and closed the doors on Jews desperately seeking to escape Hitler. That came after thousands of years of Jewish aspirations to return to Israel. This was a return, not a sudden birthing, but a return to Israel. We longed for Jerusalem since we were exiled by the Babylonians and then by the Romans.
Thank you.
We built our country at that point by the blood of our own ancestors.
Al.
Rabbi, I'm going to take the page from your own book. And there's a story about an old gentleman who's praying at the Western Wall. It turns out he's been doing this for 25 years. Every single day he goes to the Kollel and prays to God for peace in the Middle East.
I'm sorry, please speak closer to the mic.
News of his habit travels, and an American journalist is sent over to Israel to interview him. And the journalist goes over to the Western Wall, and sure enough, she sees this gentleman praying for peace. She waits for him to finish, and she walks over to him and says, "Tell me, after 25 years of praying for peace, how does it feel?" And he looks at her and he says, "Like I'm talking to a wall." Today, we're not going to talk to walls. We're going to talk to people. We are going to endeavor to be factual, intellectually honest, and I thank Rabbi Einhorn for hosting this event, and I thank Shannon and Ghazi and Hani for participating in it, and Joey, of course, for his presence as the introducer and moderator this evening. Thank you.
Professor Abdal.
I really want to thank Alexa, Nightingale, and the group which really has arranged for this meeting. I really hope that we can achieve something, especially that the fact most of the audience are from our Jewish brothers and sisters. Maybe we can really give some kind of an idea about the true facts on the ground in Palestine. If we're going to be coming and talking about passions and raising voices about this land is ours and that land is theirs and so on and so forth, we're never going to achieve anything. This is rubbish, with all due respect. There are facts. When the premise for the establishment of Israel is that this is the land of no people promised to people with no land. This is the utmost rubbish, because this land in 1901, 99% of it belonged to the Palestinian Arabs, Muslims and Christians. This is a true fact. Every single one of you should know that, regardless of what you hear anywhere. In Jewish newspapers, in synagogues, in the streets of New York. The more you listen to this and the more you really become passionate and energized about Israel and about the fact that these Palestinians are nothing but terrorists and this and that, that will not lead to anything. I am a person who was born in Jerusalem. I remember the buses of refugees and people coming down the hill from Al-Aqsa Mosque, because my house is in Ras Al-Amoud, where Israel is now establishing another yet settlement in the midst of our people. Ras Al-Amoud is but a very small section of East Jerusalem. This, my friends, and I mean it, you are my friends, because I'm really trying to reach out to you. I'm trying to reach out to you to tell you about the dangers in moving and advancing in a policy which will lead to nothing but disaster, not only to Israel, but to the Palestinians as well, and to the whole people in the region. I told you about what was the situation in 1901, then about the partition plan and giving 54% to the Israeli state, 46% to the Palestinian state, and then the 1967 war, and the establishment of these settlements in the West Bank and all over. I was in Jerusalem and in the West Bank this past January. You wouldn't believe the life in there. I don't really want to dwell on this because I don't want to take more time of my time now to go on, okay? But I just want to tell you, the more we really think of what is really realistic for both people, the better it is for everybody. The creation of K Street in America did not really come out of nothing, because reasonable people began to realize the catastrophic policies of the Israeli government. And the more we move away from that, the better it is for everybody.
Okay. Brother Ghazi.
Thank you, Rabbi, and all for inviting us and welcoming us amongst you. We are written under the title Pro-Palestine Expert and pro-Israel expert on the announcement. I would like to be called pro-Holy Land person. I have a short poem which I would like to read to you. It's concerned with the whole issue. I call it Salam, Shalom, and Peace for a united Holy Land state. Reverend Martin Luther King had a dream which we must realize together as one. I also, like Martin Luther King, have a dream of a peaceful Holy Land where Jews, Christians, and Muslims could live in peace and walk hand in hand and say to each other, cousins, your fears and sufferings we do understand. All of us are created equally by the same God, Allah, the only one, We are therefore brothers and sisters in humanity who became cousins. Do you comprehend? Cousins, you say that God promised Prophet Abraham, unto thy seed will I give this land. Well, cousins, Abraham's seed must include Ishmael, his and Hagar's firstborn son. Please don't say you didn't know, and please don't pretend. And let's all share the dream of a peaceful state to be named the Holy Land. Israeli Jews can call it Israel. Arab Christians and Muslims can call it Palestine. For it is written in the Torah of Moses, in the Gospel of Jesus, and Al-Quran, Allah or God, the judge, will question all of us, saying, what have you done to my land? What have you done to my land? Because of your greed and wars, orphans' cries continue to heaven ascend. Children of Adam and Eve, work for peace and justice before you return to sand. I believe that Israelis and Palestinians could share with equity Jerusalem and the Holy Land. After all, we share the same sun, moon, air, water, even genes, all God's gift to woman and man. Selfishness, arrogance, military occupation, and economic strangulation. How long will they stand?
Please wind down.
Injustices with violence will continue to breed resistance and counter-violence. Listen to me, friend. If you honestly want peace, then work for justice before all of us face a horrible end. So let's realize the dream and share with equity the milk and honey of the Holy Land.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, there's a lot to discuss tonight. It's very apparent. We have a lot to discuss. Let's begin. Let us begin. Now, it's now only, we called it two sides, we called two pro-Palestinian, two pro-Israel, whether it's pro-peace and pro-religion. We are going to stick to that breakdown as far as how many speak at each time. Each question I pose, I ask that only one from each side begin to speak. I'll begin now from this side for the first question. The next question will begin from that side and go back and forth. The first question, you started with Martin Luther King.
Excuse me, Rabbi, will you permit a rejoinder to an opening statement?
What?
Will you permit a rejoinder to an opening statement?
I'm sorry, Al. Once I do that, then each one will have a rejoinder. I ask that on any response, respond within that response to the opening statements, if you will, and also summation, just in the interest of moving the questions along.
Thank
the
you.
first question, you mentioned Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King once said that you declare, my friend, that you do not hate the Jews, you are merely anti-Zionist. Anti-Zionism means anti-Semitism. Are those two one and the same? Was Martin Luther King right when he said that? Let's begin from this side of the table.
I believe Zionism is a political movement in addition to being originally a religious movement. The term anti-Semitism, I think, should be explained and corrected. All Arabs are Semites. There are more Semites who are Arabs in the world than there are Jews in the world. So the term should not be exclusively used as belonging to Jews. Anti-Semitic should be called anti-Jewish, and so as not to confuse it. Martin Luther King is not wrong because his understanding of the term, I think, differs. But the important thing is that we ought to differentiate between Zionism as a political movement to create a Jewish state in Palestine, whereas Judaism and Jews, with our understanding, is the religion of Judaism, not the political aspiration of Zionism.
Thank you. The other side of the table.
It is inconceivable to define Zionism as separate from Judaism. When Theodor Herzl convened finally the Zionist conference, it was as a result of the Dreyfus trial, essentially, which was years of French Jew hatred. And you couldn't have had Jew hatred without Judaism. And you couldn't have had Dreyfus stripped of his rank based on slanders and fraud that we have continuous to today against Jews throughout the world, if it wasn't because of hatred against Judaism. There was no Israel, it was Judaism, it was Jews. And Herzl convened a lot of secular Jews. So he called it Zionism, but it was based on Zion, on Zion, on the Har Habayit of Jerusalem, on the Mount of Jerusalem, on the Holy Temple. Everything about Jews was a return, a love of our land that God gave us. And we were commanded to be good citizens wherever we were thrown into, but we were exiled. We were thrown out of our country by all the other nations of the world. And one does not lose one's right of inheritance because aggressors from elsewhere come and throw one out. We have every right to return. We have every right to reclaim what's ours. And it was simply a return to Zion. And that is Zionism. You cannot malign the term. It is indistinguishable from our religion.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Next question. Question number 2. I think within this you'll get the rejoinder. But here we go. Here's question number 2. Understanding the Middle East is to know its history. To quote Noam Chomsky, in 1948, Israel ethnically cleansed Palestine to make room for itself, and as a result took over 78% of mandatory Palestine. And secondly, in 1967, Israel imposed a brutal and callous occupation over the remaining 22% of the land, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. This statement, valid or grossly invalid? We begin on the pro-Israel side.
Grossly, grossly, grossly invalid. Absurd. It flies in the face of every documented fact that we have at our disposal. The Israelis are not conquerors. The Israelis are there because it is their homeland, established from the time of the Bible. It has been the goal of every nation to evict the Jews from their homes. When their homes were in Eastern Europe, they were evicted from there. The French, the English, of course the Spanish, all evicted the Jews, said, get out. When the state of Israel was finally created, it was from there, finally, that nobody could tell us to get out. No more, no longer would Jewish people be at the mercy of the kindness of strangers. That will never happen again. We have a nation, we have an Air Force, the best military pound for pound in the world, and it's just not going to roll over and play dead for Mahmoud Abbas or for Rahm Emanuel.
Please respond to this side.
Quote.
Oh.
We will.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You see, I always find it very refreshing. Never fail. When you talk to American Zionists, they are so ignorant of the fact on the ground. You know, I was talking to an Israeli in a cafe in Jerusalem. He was the most reasonable person who you can really talk to, because he lives the life. Here, we have Zionists, and I don't really apologize for this, because sooner or later, The day will come when you realize what has befallen the Palestinians during all these years, from the beginning of the 19th or the 20th century to the present, is totally unfair, unjust, and uncalled for. You see, to back Israel, right or wrong, that is the attitude of most American Zionists, is not going to lead to anything but more catastrophe. My friend Alan here, he says we have the Air Force. God bless you, the Air Force. If you're going to be counting on the Air Force, and you're going to be counting on military power, I don't think Israel's force and its strength as compared with the Arabs really is something beyond the Crusaders' force when they occupied Jerusalem for 70 years. And they were kicked out. By whom? By the people who owns the land in Jerusalem and in Palestine. So whether it is going to be Israel now is powerful, Israel is strong, it has its Air Force. I never really heard this before, that Israel has an Air Force. Are you very proud of what they really did in Gaza for their Air Force? Where every human rights group actually called Israel a war crime nation. This is what has happened. We don't want this. I did not really come here for you to come and tell me that Israel has an Air Force, Israel is strong, and we're going to be there. We came here to accommodate each other in a solution which will be peaceful to everybody, to Israelis and Palestinians. But for you actually to take this attitude and me to take the other extreme, we're going to get nowhere, my friend. We are here to solve the problem for the sake of the Palestinian children and the Israeli children. Because crazies, people who believe that God is a real estate agent who really grant the land to this and that group, this is a stupid theory. The people who lived there actually were Palestinians, you name them, whatever. They could have been Palestinian Jews, and they converted to Islam when Islam came in there. If you're going to be talking like this, then why don't you just kick all Americans out of America and give it back to the Indians?
Okay, it sounded like, it seems like both Brother Ghazi and Alan both have something to say here, which if both are going to speak, that means we're opening up this discussion to one more comment from either side, as long as it's fine with both sides. Is that fine with both sides?
Rabbi, I just want to say something, please,
yes,
if I may.
Last comment.
Yeah. We don't really want to go this route of shenanigans, this land belongs to me, this land. I told you in 1901, Palestine was 99% Arab land. And I'm not really looking actually to get 99% of Palestine as Arab. Now there are facts on the ground. There are Israel. For any Arab actually to say that Israel does not exist is rubbish. There are people in there. There are 5.5 million Israelis living there. We have to accommodate each other and find a solution which will really be justice for everybody. Otherwise, catastrophe is going to befall all of us.
Rabbi, may I address the question?
Yeah, that side one comment, this side one comment. And then
I debated Noam Chomsky when I was in college. He came from MIT over to Tufts. I don't want to betray my age, but so be it. And Noam Chomsky comes from the Jewish left. He is a linguistics expert who nevertheless took upon the Middle East because of the Arab community. And as usual, he's wrong. Jordan was, Transjordan was carved out to protect Syria, to protect Saudi Arabia from Syria by the British. sometime before. And Transjordan was part of the Jewish homeland, as had been promised to the Jews following World War I. So we lost, and if you look at a map, I'm not going to bring out maps, just look at a map and see how much of the Jewish homeland was already lost. And by the way, that's biblical heartland of the Jews. And if you want to go through the Bible and see and trace the cities of Abraham and the journey to Shiloh and to Shem and down to Beersheba, you'll see that it goes through Judea, Samaria, and what is Transjordan, and we're not anywhere near Tel Aviv. So all that was taken away, and we were not allowed near Judea and Samaria until the 67 war. Jews were not allowed in any portion of that land until Israel got it in 67, reclaimed it, and then everybody was in peace. That's when people had peace. His figures are completely wrong, 70%. We never had 70%. Chomsky knows full well how to read a map. He never read it to be accurate.
Brother Ghazi, and that's it for the next question.
I think it's important to listen to the original Zionists who created the states rather than to new young Zionists who weren't there then. David Ben-Gurion wrote to his son in 1937 and said, "We will expel the Arabs and take their place." In 1947, in his diary, Ben-Gurion also said, "In each attack, a decisive blow should be struck, resulting in the destruction of homes and the expulsion of the population," unquote. The Israeli historian Benny Morris wrote, in 1948, Ramla and Lidda were occupied by Zionist forces and a curfew was imposed. At 11:30 a.m., many Lidda inhabitants shut up in their houses, took fright at the sudden outbreak of shooting outside. Some rushed into the street, only to be cut down by Israeli fire. In the confusion, many unarmed detainees in the detention areas in the center of town, in the mosque and church compounds, were shot and killed. At 13:30 hours, before the shooting had completely died down, Operation Danny HQ issued the following order to Yiftah Brigade, said, quote, "The inhabitants of Lidda must be expelled quickly without attention to age." Martin Buber in 1961 said, "Only an internal revolution can have the power to heal our people of their murderous sickness of causeless hatred. It is bound to bring complete ruin upon us. Only then will the old and young in our land realize how great was our responsibility to those miserable Arab refugees in whose towns we have settled Jews who were brought from afar, whose homes we have inherited, whose fields we now sow and harvest, the fruit of whose gardens, orchards, and vineyards we gather, and in whose cities that we have robbed, we put up houses of education, charity, and prayer, while we babble and rave about being the people of the book and the light of the nations."
Thank you.
That's Jewish philosopher Martin Buber.
Okay, thank you. We now, we're not going to take a break. What's going to happen is, while I change the tape for 1 minute, we are not allowed to discuss anything related to this topic, so I will then ask them questions that have nothing to do with anything. For 1 minute, you ready to change your tape? Okay, we start with this side. Favorite movie not related to politics? Go ahead. Begin.
Oh, Jerusalem. Cast a Giant Shadow with Kirk Douglas.
Next, Alan.
Casablanca.
Exodus.
Dr. Strangelove.
Honey.
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind.
I think Joey has to go to the radio. I want to thank him.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you very much.
Can we do a group shot quickly?
Thank you. We're missing one movie, though, Brother Ghazi.
I think the message, which is a historical story of the rise of Islam in Arabia, that was done by a famous movie played by
Anthony Quinn.
Anthony Quinn.
Anthony Quinn.
It is the story of Islam, how it started. I think it would be beneficial if some of you dug it up from Blockbuster, inshallah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Netanyahu just said that we will not allow the West Bank to become Judenrein, a place free of Jews. The question that is being posed to the pro-Israel side: why is it that the West Bank must be free of Jews? Wait a second, we started from this side. We're starting from this side, actually. We just started from this side. We start from this side. Why is it that the West Bank must, in fact, be free of Jews? And is that statement true? Is it not true? Let's begin.
I'm sorry, say it again. What was the quote?
Bibi Netanyahu said that we will not agree to allow the West Bank to become Judenrein, free of Jews. Free of Jews. Why is there a ban on Jews living in the West Bank? Or is that statement false?
I don't think it is Jews should be banned. Maybe we should exchange population. Let's have the Palestinians return, and they can live with the Israelis on both sides of the bank, whether it's in the West Bank or in the east side of Palestine, Jerusalem. I think it's important to remember also what Mr. Obama had recently said in Cairo. And it's important, he said that the United States does not accept the legitimacy of continued Israeli settlements. The construction violates previous agreements and undermines efforts to achieve peace. It is time for these settlements to stop. But still, I would say, in my dream, that all of Palestine should really be open to Jews, Christians, and Muslims who wish to live at peace together. As we live here together in peace, why can't we do the same in the Holy Land?
Thank you. Other side.
The question,
Closer to the mic, sir.
the issue that was just raised by Ghazi of population exchange is very interesting. So I would ask him, is he suggesting that since all Jews should leave the West Bank, that all Arabs should leave Israel?
I didn't say they should leave.
Well, you
I said
suggest
they should
population
live.
exchange, and
I said
that's,
they should live together.
well, that's very different. Let me read to you the words of Saeed Erekat, the chief Palestinian negotiator. Nobody should agree to Israeli settlers remaining in the Palestinian state. Grant settlers Palestinian citizenship? We reject this out of hand. If there are any Jews left in a Palestinian state, the Palestinian Authority has said you are on your own. We will not protect you, we will not defend you. Now that does not sound like equal protection under the laws. I find it difficult to understand how President Obama, the first black occupant of the White House in over 230 years, after all he has personally gone through, after all his people have gone through, can sit in Washington and tell the Israelis that the West Bank must be segregated. That is what he wants. No more Jewish settlements in the West Bank, or now the Israeli states to East Jerusalem. segregation is either right or it's wrong. We've decided in this country that it's wrong. Somehow now we are being told that it is right to segregate the Jews out of East Jerusalem and out of the West Bank. This is morally reprehensible.
If we do have one more comment from both sides, then we'll continue. So that means Shannon and then Hani. Okay, we'll go.
The Prime Minister Netanyahu made the comment to German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier. It was pointedly chosen to make it to the German Foreign Minister because...
Shannon, I'm sorry, hold the mic down.
Because the propaganda aimed at the Jews lately, especially on college campuses, is that we're the Nazis. The Zionists are the Nazis. Israel is the Nazis. We're out there with them for the cleansing. What is exactly the opposite intention at the settlers? They're not settlers. They're city inhabitants. That they have strong cities with international ties. And they're environmentalists, just like the president of this country. And he made it to the German minister because it was Germany who had that concept in mind. And if you, let's understand what the principle is very clearly. Muslims live all over Israel, in every section of the Green Line, before, during, and after 67. Not only that, but they settle illegally, and they are not removed. They have outposts, and they are not challenged. Only the Jews, not the Christians, the Muslims, the Druids, anybody. Only the Jews are removed, are challenged in court, are told you are illegally settled with outposts. They call every possible kind of name, are defamed, and are challenged internationally, and are called militants just like the Taliban. Only the Jews, nobody else. And so when it is stated that the Jews must be removed from Judea and Samaria, it is ethnic cleansing and nothing less. When you talk about taking autonomy or taking sovereignty, it is never talked of in terms of taking away a population. When France and Germany had wars, or Britain and France, they never said, now, get rid of all your ex-population. The only time that was done was in India and Pakistan, and still you're left with 150 million Muslims in India. It has never been talked of in these terms except where Jews are concerned.
Thank you, Hani, and that's it.
You know, it is really amazing, definitely amazing, really, that we just forget about the facts. The fact is that the West Bank and East Jerusalem are occupied territories by international law. And the Fourth Geneva Convention says that you cannot change. Even if you want to administer, you have to administer with United Nations observation. Not on your own, take the land, grab it, make settlements, change the whole demography, try to establish settlements. Not try, what do you mean try? They are establishing settlements left and right. The fact on the ground is that Israel, in its policies, does not, and I really repeat that, does not want peace. Does not. The fact is that these people are interested in peace, P-I-E-C-E. They are not interested in P-E-A-C-E. That's the point. Land, look at what is happening with the apartheid wall they are establishing in the West Bank. They say that this is for the security of Israel. If you really want to go and see that, they made nothing but ghettos of Arab villages and towns. The highways established on appropriated Arab, confiscated Arab land. It is open to the settlers. Arabs and Muslims, and Christians, of course, Arabs that include both, they can really walk up the mountains because they really have to avoid the Israeli checkpoints. They have to actually deliver their babies on the checkpoints, that is okay because they are inhuman. If that is what you call peace, and that is what Netanyahu really thinks any Arab leader can accept, he has a lot to learn. Because nobody, even including a guy as moderate and I don't really want to say that moderate. He is actually a lackey of Israel, somebody like Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas is nothing but really a lackey of Israel because he is really doing what Israel is asking. This is what is happening. If you really want real peace, you have really to sit with the real people. The real people, the Palestinian people, there, talk sense. Somebody like Netanyahu is not going to bring anything but catastrophe to Israel. He is a fanatic. He is, even Israelis, I don't really want to repeat what Israelis say of Netanyahu. How many times he really was actually accused of doing the wrong thing, of robbing money from the government, from all his positions in government. That is the guy Netanyahu you really are so proud of.
Thank you, Hani. Thank you. Okay, before we continue this next question, we'll segue, so we'll continue. The two more questions that I would like to pose, we'll then open it up for a couple. Some people will not get to ask as consideration for time, but we will open it up after two more questions, and then summation, and I'm sure no one's running out to the car, but you get some time then. Okay, we'll start on the pro-Israel side. A great critic of Israel, Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, wrote, "The Palestinians could have a state on the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem tomorrow, if they and the Arab League clearly recognized Israel, renounced violence. Anyone who says otherwise does not know Israel today." Please discuss that statement.
The number of times that the Palestinians have been offered and rejected a state of their own is so numerous as you can't count it on one hand. We could start with the Peel Commission in 1937, when the Arabs said no. We could then go to the UN partition plan. The Arabs said no. Ben-Gurion had been told, pursuant to the Balfour Declaration, which was incorporated into the League of Nations mandate under which Britain ruled Palestine, that the entire area was supposed to be a Jewish state. Then Winston Churchill and the British gave 80% of the, quote, Palestinian area to the Hashemites and created Jordan. All right, now we're left with 20%. 10% for Israel, 10% for the Arabs. It isn't what they wanted. Ben-Gurion said, half a country is better than none. The Arabs said, no, and started another war. In 1967, Israel did not conquer the West Bank and Gaza. They successfully defended their people from an onslaught which was described by the Arab League and promised to be, quote, a war of extermination. So Israel, after gaining the upper hand in the West Bank and in Gaza, says to the Arabs, take back the West Bank, take back Gaza, run it, control it, liberate it, create a state, do anything you want with it, but just give us peace. And only a few months later at Khartoum, we heard the famous three no's. No peace, no recognition, no negotiation. Under Barack, after Barack in 2000 with Clinton, they were offered 95% of the West Bank, and they said no. Under Olmert, they were offered 100% of the square area that the West Bank comprised, and they said no. Now, Hani is very interested in history. So let me read you a little bit of history, because this is important stuff. The distinguished Arab American Princeton University professor Philip Hittite testified against partition before the Anglo-American Committee in 1946, and this is what he said. There is no such thing as Palestine in history. Absolutely not. Palestine is never mentioned in the Quran. Rather, it is called the Holy Land, Al-Arad al-Maqdash. The first Congress of Muslim Christian Associations met in Jerusalem in 1919. The following resolution was adopted. We consider Palestine as part of Arab Syria, as it has never been separated from it at any time. We are connected with it by national, religious, linguistic, natural, economic, and geographic bounds.
Let's wind down.
Then in 1937, local Arab leader Ali Bey Abdul Hadi told the Peel Commission, quote, there is no such country as Palestine. Palestine is a term the Zionists invented. There is no Palestine in the Bible.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Come from the side.
Yes, I think we need to study our history as to what happened, for example, at the UN concerning the West Bank and Jerusalem and so on. A very important resolution that all of us should really look and listen to and study. It is called resolution number 465 in 1980. It was adopted by the Security Council and voted also by the United States. Among things that was said in it, says that the Security Council determines that all measures taken by Israel to change the physical character, demographic composition, institutional structure, or status of the Palestinian and other Arab territories occupied since 1967, including Jerusalem, or any part thereof, have no legal validity, and that Israel's policy and practices of letting part of its population and new immigrants in these territories constitute a flagrant violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in times of war, and also constitute a serious obstruction to achieving a comprehensive and lasting peace in the Middle East. So all these rights and saying that we can build here and destroy here is all illegal if you really want to follow legality, because it was the UN that recommended the partition of Palestine. The Israelis accepted the partition, and the Arabs didn't, because they wanted the Palestine to stay complete, united, not divided. There's the story when two mothers were claiming the son is theirs, and Solomon said, okay, let's cut him in half, and the real mother said, no, don't cut him.
Thank you. Would you like to go 1-1? Let's go 1-1 again? Yeah, this side, let's go Hani first, and then we continue file that side.
I just really want to, it seems that Alan his history is different from what we know in history. He said that the Palestinians have lost so many opportunities to establish their own state. Where would you expect Palestinians to establish their own state with all the practices Israel is doing on the ground? If you really were to go to the West Bank, well, I was there. There are, by the way, folks, 600, that's one here, I have in the New York Times, 646 checkpoints in the West Bank. No Palestinian in the West Bank can leave Jerusalem, period. They cannot leave Jerusalem if they really have a job there. That Jerusalem, which is really so holy, they've been working in Jerusalem for so long. You really have to spend at least about 2.5 hours from Ramallah to reach Jerusalem because of the Israeli checkpoint, the insults which you really get on these Israeli checkpoints, when a teenager Israeli soldier would be insulting a man in his 50s and his 60s and doing all of these shenanigans. All the highways are open to the Israeli settlers. Palestinians are forbidden, although these highways are built on confiscated Palestinian land. I want to read to you here from an up editorial piece in the New York Times on June 22nd, 2009 by Tony Judd, who is also a Jew. All right? Now let me read to you. There are about 120 official Israeli settlements in the occupied territories of the West Bank. In addition, there are unofficial settlements whose number is estimated variously from 80 to 100. Under international law, and listen here please, under international law there is no difference between these two categories. Both are contraventions of Article 47 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which explicitly prohibits the annexation of land consequent to the use of force, a principle restated in the Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter. So there is no such thing as legal Israeli settlements and illegal Israeli settlements. All of them are illegal. And there is no such thing as segregation against the Jews living in the West Bank, because those Jews do not belong there in the first place.
Okay.
They are occupied.
Thank you.
Hani, thank you very much for that lucid statement, which shows everybody that this is exactly about turning the West Bank and East Jerusalem Judenrein. According to you, all settlements are illegal.
That's the international law here.
No, it's not. The Geneva Fourth Convention doesn't say that, and if you had bothered to read it, as I have, you would know that it does not apply in the event of a defensive war as Israel had to fight in 1967. You complain about the checkpoints. Please remind the people here how many Israeli soldiers have been killed by Palestinians smuggling in weapons, suicide bomb belts, explosives, rifles, and detonating them at the checkpoints. A Palestinian woman comes in an ambulance. She's stopped at the checkpoint. She goes through the metal detector and it goes off. She says it's her leg. She has a piece of metal in her leg from God knows what. They say, fine, go inside with this Israeli woman and show her the metal in your leg. She goes inside, shows her the metal in her leg, and pushes a button and detonates and murders this woman who is working at the checkpoint. That is why ambulances have to be stopped. That is why cars have to be inspected. Because the Palestinians have used women and children to murder Israeli women and children. And we should stick to the point of the question. Why must the West Bank be Judenrein? Why is the West Bank the only place in the world where Jews are not allowed to live in peace? Why are Jews not allowed to live in East Jerusalem in peace? Netanyahu said just the other day, Palestinians can buy homes in West Jerusalem. Israelis can buy homes in East Jerusalem.
That's a lie.
No, it's not a lie. It's in fact a recent truth.
Hani, comment at a later point.
This is about two people living together. The Israelis have done everything they can to promote that. You have Palestinians with full citizenship in Israel. You have Palestinians who sit in the Knesset. You have Palestinians that sat in the Israeli cabinet. Tell me, honey, how many Jews sit on the Palestinian National Council? You say that Abbas is a mouthpiece for Netanyahu? Then who do you stand for? Hamas? That's your alternative. You're either with Abbas, who's Fatah, or you're with Hamas. And if you're with Hamas, Hamas refuses to recognize Israel, to enter into any peace agreements with Israel, and is constitutionally dedicated, as Fatah still is, by the way, to the destruction of Israel. And Hamas has gone on record as saying that when they defeat the Israelis and they take over the rest of Israel, the Jews in Palestine, their Palestine, will have three options. They can either leave, they can either convert, or they can die.
Okay, thank you. Let's stop there for that question. The last question that I'm going to pose. If you were super insightful, super powerful, super knowledgeable, and Palestinians, Israelis, and Americans came to you for advice, as, all right, everybody's fighting and debating about X, Y, and Z, what do you recommend and what do you suggest? Because everybody's tried everything. What do you suggest as the only viable solution to the future of this problem? We begin on this side, right? We begin on this side, yes.
I have a different focus these days from most everybody. You can see that we're not going to get a consensus, but we can get a consensus today thanks to this president, and we should take advantage of him for what we can get out of him. And he wants to reach out to the Muslim world, and the Muslim world, unfortunately, has never been too environmentally conscious. And right now, we don't have good water, we don't have clean air, our species are disappearing, and in the Middle East, there is nothing more important than that, and water. And I supported the Oslo Accords only for one reason, that they promoted clean water and water accords, and those were the first to go by the wayside, unfortunately. I believe that if everybody put all their energies into searching for environmental success and put everything else on hold and just sought some kind of consensus on the priorities on an environmental basis, this is possibly, as originally under the Oslo Accords, the only form of agreement we might initially reach. And if we come to a meeting of the minds with the American president leading the way in the Muslim community, we might make some headway and then be able to take it from there. And in the meantime, save part of the planet where we have some extremely important resources. I remember that in Iran, we were saving all the species like the ibex until Khomeini came in with his revolutionary terror, and every species the whole world had tried to save was eaten on the spot. Even in South America, there are sheikhs who are now enlarging ranches for the preservation of endangered species. Israel is the most environmentally conscious nation in the world, and on Earth Day, celebrated with a gusto second to none. But it is not recognized for this by any part of this administration that prioritizes environment above everything else. This is where we can focus our energies. We are not going to reach an accord with anybody else right now except by protesting the harm they wish to do by sacrificing Jewish interests. So if we want to reach a consensus, let's go on an environmental basis, and that's the advice I would give.
Okay, interesting approach. Let's begin this side. We'll allow everybody to respond to this question, by the way, as it is a significant one and it's most useful, practical for our future.
You know, Sharon, I really admire you. You got a clear head. Of course, you can afford that. You are torturing Palestinians. You are occupying Palestinians. You are taking Palestinians' land every hour. And you can really just look for environmental issues. God bless you. And the same thing goes for our friend Aaron here, who said that
Are you reading from my book now, honey?
Who do you want to rule the Palestinians? Let that to the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people will choose their leader, just as the Israeli people choose their leaders.
Who do you choose, honey? Who do you
Please,
choose?
Alan, go ahead, please, go ahead.
Excuse me?
You're right, Alan, continue. You're right.
The Palestinian people should choose their leaders. We don't want lackeys. We want people who really represent the people. And don't worry about that. So let us handle that. I just want to say that there is going to be no solution to the problem as long as the minds which rule Israel is like the mind of Netanyahu and Lieberman. Those guys, if there is really a good international law and a good United Nations, those people should be locked up for their crimes. And that does not include that only. They include Ehud Barak, who was the defense minister actually during the Olmert regime, and Olmert himself for ordering what they really did in Gaza. That is not my talk alone. It is the talk of the people in the international community. That's why Israeli leaders have to check with the Europeans before they departed, just in the aftermath of the Gaza war. Are they going to be arrested at the airport? They did not depart from Tel Aviv until they got the guarantees that they're not going to be arrested. And that's the way it is going to be if we're going to be really continuing this. Israeli public, regardless of their air force, Alan, and their might, they are living in fear every second. You don't want to believe this? It is up to you. But that is the attitude in the Israeli communities.
Okay.
So unless people who really have the right mind to sit together, to think of your neighbor as a neighbor, to think that I don't really want an additional settlement here, it really looks good and the land is fertile. As long as the thinking in Israel is going to continue in this direction, there will never be peace. During the 1993 Oslo Accord, I was one of those people in the White House.
Honey, close it.
And I really looked with hope for that. What did the Israelis do right after that? They added to the Israeli settlements in the West Bank 3 times what was before the Oslo Accords. So actually, if you really were to go in the West Bank now, you find nothing but a Swiss cheese land. All of it actually occupied by settlement here, settlement there. Jerusalem is surrounded by settlements from all over to prevent Palestinians from going there. No Palestinian can go to the Al-Aqsa Mosque if he was older than 50, if he was younger than 50 years old. Is that what you call, what you are proud of about free Israel? Democracy Israel?
Thank you, honey.
If I were really you, honestly, I would be ashamed of that.
Thank you, honey. Okay. For the record, I don't know Alan, but Shannon would never hurt a fly, just by the way, as far as the beginning of that comment. Beyond that, Brother Ghazi, and then we'll go to Alan.
Is this the final statement?
It's not summation. This is this question, and then we'll take a couple questions from here, and then you can make a final statement.
Okay. They spoke about citizens, that Arabs have the right to vote in Israel and so on, which is true. But they didn't tell us that there are 2 levels of citizenship. There are citizens who can vote, Arabs, and there is Jewish nationality law, which gives you privileges because you are Jewish, specifically if your mother is Jewish or you are a convert. This is racism that should not be used, I believe. So to brag about it is not good for Israel. Israel is militarily superior, as they are saying, maybe so for the time being. But what's going to happen in the future? Is it not better to resolve it peacefully now before somebody else got an atomic bomb like the Israelis have, and somebody can throw one by mistake or hurt somebody? It's going to be a horrible future for everybody concerned. What we really ought to do is to have wise people sit down on both sides and begin educating the future generation, the young generation, the inevitability of living together in peace. We have to educate both children, because our generation seems to have a very stubborn mind that sees it only one way and that's it. But hopefully the future generation should be educated from now, if not in the area, maybe outside the area, that they must live together sooner or later. And that is the only way to really survive. That is why I am calling to have real peace. We need to implement all UN Security Council resolutions. The whole world have discussed the Palestine-Israel conflict for the past 61 years. All the minds of the world have sat down and discussed back and forth for 61 years, my friend. They have reached some conclusions that make sense. And there are resolutions on the book. Let's implement these resolutions so that both sides can be comfortable and not worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow to me. It is important to implement United Nations resolutions so that everything can be legitimate. Put yourself in the shoes of a Palestinian who lost his home. If I take your home and kick you out and then give you a garage to live in, you will not accept me taking over your home. That is the simple problem. That is the whole problem. It is nothing more or less. They give it religious names, they give it discussions back and forth. The truth is, my home has been taken away and I cannot go back to it. That is the problem. If it happens here, a policeman would come and kick you out and give you back your home.
Thank you. Alan, let's close this part and then we'll take questions.
Okay. Insofar as Hani's comment about 50-year-old and younger men not being allowed on at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, I find it curious that he says that, because the Temple Mount is regulated by the Muslim Waqf, and they are the ones who determine who goes up to the Temple Mount. Ghazi mentions a very good point, that it's necessary to educate the children. Every generation we worry about the children. We say, this is going to have to start from the ground up, because the current leadership is just too highly poisoned for negotiations to get anywhere. The problem with this is that the Palestinians have been relentless in poisoning the minds of their own children. They are taught to hate Jews. They are taught how to kill Jews in their schools, in their mosques, in their homes, on their TV, in the official Palestinian media. You cannot expect or reasonably think that there is going to be peace coming from the next generation when these kids watch cartoons on television that tell them that the Jews killed their leaders. The Jews stole their homes. They've poisoned the minds of that generation. It's too late already. Second, insofar as the occupation is concerned, again, that gets to the question of why was there violence against the Jews and the Israelis in 1948 when there was no occupation? Why was there violence against the Israelis pre-1967 when the West Bank was completely dominated and run by the Jordanians? Why did the Jordanians permit the Palestinians to burn synagogues in East Jerusalem? Why did the Palestinians in East Jerusalem turn Jewish cemeteries into toilets? Why did the Palestinians in East Jerusalem use Jewish tombstones to pave their streets? There are a lot of questions that need good answers. And Ghazi is providing a very good environment in which to discuss these by being reasonably calm and at least asking the questions. But we're not going to get anywhere unless we know what the facts are.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, now it's, everybody's been waiting, I know. So, that was quick. All right, slow down. Okay, hold on 1 second. Before we get to your question, I just want to say one thing. Before we say anything, 1 second, I'm sorry. I just want to ask that nobody give any speeches. We ask no speeches. I know we all have a dream to be on panels. No speeches. Just get right to the question. If it's a comment and not a question, email.
Okay. Reader that Al-Hayat newspapers agreed to this. They are not Palestinian refugees. They are UNRWA's hostages. They were told to leave their homes in 1947, and they left. And when they left, because they're told to leave, they came to work in this region.
Is that a question?
Wait.
Get to a question, yes.
They came to work in this region.
All right.
And then when they left their house, who ambushed them? This is from a major hearing. UNRWA ambushed them. They are not refugees. They came from different countries. You know that, right?
Okay, so the question is...
Nobody knows that.
Okay,
Nobody brought
but it's got to be a
that up.
question. I was saying, the question that's being asked is, the Palestinians that were there in 1947 were actually
Those
those...
that left were ambushed.
Were ambushed and working there, were people who were
By
actually working
UNRWA.
there and coming as workers.
And they are
That's
under
true.
hostage.
Thank you. You got the
And
question.
this was on BBC
Thank you.
also.
Thank you.
Okay.
BBC
You
was
mentioned,
answering.
are you done? Are you done?
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, you mentioned something about UNRWA. You mentioned something about UNRWA, right? You said UNRWA.
United Nations.
You know what UNRWA stands for?
Yeah,
What does it stand
They
for?
are the Nazis that came from
What does
Europe.
it stand for? United Nations, please.
United Nazis.
No, man. It is United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestinians. You know when it was established?
Wait.
When Israel was established.
When they ambushed the people.
Ma'am, you ask a
And
question,
they
I'm
had the
answering you.
wall. No, that's when it was established.
Okay, can I answer
They
you?
followed the Jews. These are the Nazis. I think that were trial.
Sorry, please be seated.
They did a search.
Please be seated. Thank you. Please be seated.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the style of the rest of the questions.
No, but that is the question.
I know, but we'll never get anywhere if we make that the style.
Let's talk the truth.
Go ahead, please.
This question is addressed to the entire panel. As a scientist, and taking a view from Mars, let's say, it's obvious that the Earth is in trouble. You can tell by the tsunamis and the wildfires and all the disasters that are happening. When the big one happens, and I don't know when it is going to happen, and Al Gore did not win the Nobel Prize for nothing, do you think that all of this is going to lose its importance and everyone is going to then fight together for survival? Or do you think everyone is still going to hold on to this intense hate?
Thank you. Okay.
obviously, when there's a tsunami, nobody will be there to survive. We will all be dead and gone. That's why I'm saying, let us put our heads together and try to educate the children of this coming generation, my friend. Because if we do not do that, these tragedies could happen. We have seen too many bloodshed, we have seen too many people die, and it is time that we sit down and be reasonable. And the greed in human being is the cause of our problems today.
Okay, let's go to the back. Go ahead, please.
I hope I ever get this question. So, I can't remember your name. I'm sorry. Anyway, you had started talking about during one of your comments, you started talking about how the Arab nations are fantastic. They have a lot of land, they have a lot of money, and this fact is definitely correct, and nobody here can argue with that. And the Arab nations have been blessed with that. So my question is, and I'll start with this, Arabs are some of the wealthiest nations of the world. So why at this time when the Palestinian people are suffering so much, which is something that definitely from a humanitarian standpoint, Jews and Arabs can agree on, why don't they help their brothers who are so poverty-stricken? Do you think your brothers in Syria, Dubai, in Saudi Arabia, who have so many billions of dollars, which is known, they're building these magnificent hotels and these, they're building up their land, they have all this oil money. Why don't you think that they help the people? Perhaps, we're both educated people and we can think rationally instead of thinking of religion and all these other ideas of brotherhood and all this other stuff. Why don't they put up, start building condos for these people? I'm being serious. This is a real answer. Why don't they? My question is, why do you think that the Arab nations use the Palestinians and keep them poor as a tool for propaganda instead of actually helping them and coming to real solutions?
Okay.
Question is also why did Jordan recently revoke the citizenship of Palestinians in their land?
All right, let me just answer. Here, first of all, why should anybody pay for the crimes of Israel? Why? I listen to you. Please,
Save it for the next question. Save it for the next question.
Secondly,
we're going to have to answer questions if it's going to be upward.
After the criminal attack of Israel on Gaza, the Arabs actually said that they're going to pay $2 billion for the reconstruction in Gaza. Listen to me, listen. Israel did not allow 1 pound of cement to go through to Gaza. That's how Israel is behaving. Now the whole world is left hostage for Israel. There are $7.5 billion which were actually donated by the whole world to Greek. 7.5 billion. Let Israel just let actually 1 million come in. They did not even let 1 million because they don't want. They want Gaza to suffocate.
You know why? Because they're afraid they're going to use the money for terrorism. That's
Responses have to come from you. Sorry, thank you. Responses have to come from you. Go ahead.
You asked the question, you contradicted yourself. They are allowing one, but Israel does not want it.
I don't think you care about.
Please. Alan, go ahead.
All right, let's be clear about a couple of facts here. The $7.5 million that was pledged to the Palestinians in the Queen for a Day event over in Paris a couple of years ago were pledges. It wasn't the grant of money. However, the Palestinians have received billions of dollars, and it's an interesting fact that the please let me complete my thought. It's an interesting fact that the Palestinians have received.
Let this guy with his facts.
Hold on. Let him talk. Alan, please, go ahead. Alan, go ahead. Go ahead.
The Palestinians have received.
There are bad Arabs who have money and don't help, but they do help, by the way. What does that have to do with the rights of the Palestinian people to their homeland and their properties? If Rockefeller is rich, it doesn't make me rich, okay? The problem is concentrate on the sequence of events. The present situation of the Palestinians who are refugees is because the Israelis have taken over their homes and because they have blocked them from doing their agricultural, their lands are blocked by the wall. They cannot go to their properties to work it. Talking about dollars, you know how much Israel had cost U.S. taxpayers so far? $1.3 trillion. The American people sooner or later are going to find out that this is unfair. Israel is taking about half of all our U.S. foreign aid to the world is going to the Israelis. There is something wrong there. There is something wrong because that is creating enmity for the United States in Africa and in Asia. Do you know that per capita, the African got $45 per person per year. The Israelis get over 10,000 per person. There is something wrong. There is something wrong. We're talking about Palestine, Israel, and America. Forget about the others because they don't count.
Okay. We will try one more question. I would like to do more. I would love to do more. We'll try one more.
Well,
And
do it in Arabic,
what? Great. Where? What? Go for it.
I'm Palestinian. I born in Jerusalem, 1941. My name is Ghazi Khankan. My name is Ghazi Khankan. I born 1941 in Jerusalem, Palestine. Just I want to remind my friend Alan, okay, because he said no Palestine before.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand
You
that.
say it's no Palestine, it's Palestine.
No, that's what the Palestinian people said. Their leaders, the Arab people said that.
You said before, no have no Palestine country. Okay,
That's what they said.
anyway, when I got my citizenship, 1975, in USA, I went to get my citizenship, and I got my certificate, birthday, say in it, written in English, in Hebrew, in Arab, is there is Palestine. Okay, my friend? And you can't, is Palestine is not a piece of bread, you could swear it. It's Palestine there. Thank you.
Yes, so let me just respond with a comment by one of the leaders of the Palestinian Liberation Organization.
PLO. Okay.
Ahmed Shakari, later the chairman of the PLO, told the Security Council, it is common knowledge that Palestine is nothing but southern Syria. And these are words from your own people. I'm not making them up, and they don't come from Americans, Israelis, French, English, or Italians.
And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Yes, Palestine is south of Syria. What's wrong with that? Do you know geography?
It's not south of Syria, it was southern Syria.
Southern Syria, call it that. If Israel is not there, we will be united. Syria, that's all of it. We call it Bilad al-Sham. The Sham land. Yes, we are part of Sham land until Israel came as a wedge in the heart of the Arab nation because actually imperialism implanted in there. That's what happened, if you want the truth. You see, I really try to be accommodating, but you know something, it is really, I find that these 2.5 of us educating each other, of us accommodating each other, but you, look at her, she is laughing, she is very sarcastic, and you know, it is something we really came here. If I really want to come here for a Zionist propaganda thing, I wouldn't be here. I met many Zionists over in many years. I've been in many forums. I actually sat with the Israeli representative to the United Nations more than 5 times on Channel 11 and Channel 2 and Channel 4. And you could check it out. We can really accommodate each other. But for you to have such a stiff, stony mind, that is going to get nobody anywhere.
Thank you, Professor.
Nobody.
Professor.
Nobody anywhere.
My question is this. Within this realm, do you think there's ever a time or a possibility where, or what would you think is supreme or most important, God's law or man's law? Because there seems to be an understanding where God has given certain things, but then the United Nations and certain laws. So what actions, what is supreme, what do you personally think should follow?
Justice. Nothing but justice. I accept justice as it is. My friend here mentioned the United Nations resolution. Fine. But that is the will of the international community. Justice for Jews and for Arabs. That is the way we can accommodate each other. Or sooner or later, there is going to be a catastrophe befalling everybody in the Middle East.
Could there ever be a compromise?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But if we really going to have these minds of people just sarcastic about Palestinians as human beings, why don't you think of the Palestinians as human beings who really deserve to live in freedom as Israelis do? Why should they really be under occupation for more than 60 years? Why? There are so many Jews, decent Jews, who really are asking the question. K-Street did not really come out of nothing. Okay. Those are Jews who really are asking. You know, the point is, it gets to the point, Rabbi, just let me finish it. Even when a Jew sees the light, you know what the Zionists say? They say he is a Jew, he's a self-hating Jew. That really, we come to that point. When they get to that point, they are called self-hating Jew. What do you say of Professor Finkelstein? What do you say of him? He is Jew. His father was killed in Germany in the Holocaust, and he knows that. And he is realizing what is really happening to the Palestinian people. Okay. I have here something I really would love to make photocopy of it for all of you. It does not really Arab propaganda. These American news articles.
Professor, thank you. Thank you. Okay. By the way, that's fine. By the way, I do think we did learn something new tonight, and that is we have to care about our environment and take care of it, because that is also bigger than all of us here tonight. So there is new stuff learned. We shouldn't say nothing was done tonight. We did accomplish, and we will care about that. Dr. White.
Yeah, you gentlemen said you came here to educate us, so I have just a twofold question. One is, you talked about Jerusalem, and two, you talked about Islam being a religion of peace. I'd like to know how you reconcile Jerusalem with the fact that it was never mentioned once in the Quran. And I don't know the Quran, but I think that's a fact. I know that. I'm not finished. So, Jerusalem al-Quds is not mentioned in the Quran once. Secondly, your religion of peace somehow does not reconcile itself with the fact of glorifying suicide bombers, the concept of shaheed, and the 72 virgins you promised for martyrdom. I'd like you to educate me, as you came to do, and how you reconcile these 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's take it down a notch. Here we go. Take it down a notch.
Calm down first, so I can talk to you calmly. We read in the Holy Book, Al-Quran, a verse which says, chapter 17, first verse. Glory be to God who took his servant, that is Muhammad, on a night journey from Al-Masjid Al-Haram in Mecca to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, whose precincts, God says, we blessed, to show the prophet some of our God's signs, for God is all-hearing, all-seeing. In Islamic literature, Bayt al-Maqdis, the house of sanctity, that's the name of Jerusalem. It's not Yerushalayim, it's not Arabic, it is Bayt al-Maqdis. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was taken on a night journey from Mecca to Jerusalem. A purpose, because Jerusalem is also the prophets that we all believe in, from Abraham to Moses and Jesus and Isaac and Jacob and Solomon. All these are our prophets, by the way. And they are mentioned in Al-Quran as prophets in Islam. When we mention their name, we must say, peace be upon him, as reverence, because God has chosen these people to educate humanity. So the Prophet told us that praying in, and let me just read because it's important to give you the correct quotation. The Prophet said, travel for worshipping purposes and pilgrimage is restricted to 3 mosques. The sacred mosque in Mecca, my mosque in Medina, and Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. He also said, those who start procedure for pilgrimage or Umrah from Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem shall have all their sins forgiven. Also, he said, whosoever goes on pilgrimage to the Jerusalem sanctuary and worships there for one and the same year shall have his or her sins forgiven. He also said, Jerusalem is the land of the ingathering. Go to it and worship in it. For one act of worship there is like 1,000 acts of worship elsewhere. He also said that Jerusalem area of Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Haram in Mecca will be connected together at the end of time, as is the day of judgment. And Al-Sakhra, or the Dome of the Rock Mosque, is a place of special proximity to heaven. And the Prophet said he associated the rock with the ascension to heaven of Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. Thereby Muslims believe that the rock would become the place of the final junction of earth and heaven. For this reason, Muslims pray and wish to be buried in its vicinity. The Prophet said, if those who die in the sanctuary of Jerusalem is as if they had died in paradise, and those who had died close by it is as if they had died in the city of Jerusalem. So to say that it's not connected to Islam is...
Say that, I said it's not mentioned in the Quran.
Yeah, but the Quran does speak of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, which was just celebrated Saturday, by the way, by 1.5 billion Muslims.
I think Dr. Weiss is also getting at ultimately the Bible, Old Testament, and the later prophets, which is part of the Old Testament, mentions Jerusalem 823 times. 823 times. This is a reference which I know some have questioned, but I don't question your knowledge of the text better than the other historians. It's one reference which doesn't mention the word Jerusalem, mentions the sacred mosque, which I know some question that there was no mosque.
God will make it. So if it is important, Jerusalem and the Holy Land, important for Jews or Christians, it is 3 times as important to us because we believe in all the previous prophets as our own, and their association with the Holy Land and Jerusalem is part of our history and our aspiration.